Welcome to season 3 of Suffocate City. We have an interview today with the Mortal Path Alliance, which is made up of Anna and Clark. Hi, Anna and Clark.
Hello.
Hello.
So before we get into it, why don't you guys just explain what the Mortal Path Alliance is in a nutshell, and then we can unpack it a little more.
Sure. In a nutshell, the Mortal Path Alliance is a group of magic practitioners, essentially, who work with the community and provide spiritual assistance for the processes of death, dying, and transition. And that's my pitch. That's the nutshell pitch.
I like it. It's a pretty good elevator pitch.
Yep.
So how did you guys okay, let's start at the beginning. How did y'all come together to form this?
So we initially came together. I was with a queer hygge group here in Chicago, and we decided to have a little tarot night. And on that night, Anna, who I did not know, had shown up in kind of our honeypot to find other spiritually inclined queer people in Chicago. And so we immediately clicked. Anna does some runes and tarot. I do tarot and other divination forms. And then we started working together. And then we realized in around 2019 that there was kind of a deficit in the community for death work. And we both kind of had connections to that in various ways. And so we realized that, hey, this is like fate kind of brought us together and we should be collaborating on this and, using our different spiritual practices as ways to have collaboration for community, for, death, dying, grief, everything around it. And so kind of grew from there.
Yep. Yeah, we just wanted to provide, well, first of all, a way for a community to find us if they're seeking out these services, but also in a larger sense, a place to attract other peers who do death work, who can collaborate with us. Because our long-term vision is to have sort of a whole network of death work practitioners with different niche specialties so that as an alliance, we can cover the full spectrum of what folks need.
Have you seen that grow over the last couple of years, or like in a way you didn't expect or did expect?
Well, I mean, we did have a handy thing, which is here called the pandemic that happened. And so through that, surprisingly, we have a couple of other practitioners on our page as well. But through that, they each, through their networks, have also talked about this resurgence, this kind of awakening of people being just like aware of just like the power of death and grieving. Also just these transitions we're having societally in our communities, in our social circles, and on grander scales as well. So we find a lot of people new to these practicing with death and dying and death work, and slowly we're kind of helping people develop that and to eventually become like more practitioners for it to be part of our community here.
Yeah, so Clark and I co-founded the Mortal Path Alliance, and right now there's 4 of us total that are sort of officially members. We each have our different areas of specialty. I work more with grief. Clark is a psychopomp. We have a medium, and then we also have someone who focuses on facilitating life transitions through kind of her own homegrown brand of using tarot and NLP.
What was the last word you just said?
Oh, NLP.
What's NLP?
Neuro-linguistic programming. It's like a pseudo meta-science about going to core elements in people's programming to redirect paths to help uncover or to redirect where energy is going in the mind and the body. We're not experts on that.
I was going to say, and that's about all we can do about it. If you have more questions about NLP, we can connect you to Roz.
Yeah.
I do have questions. I'm still wrapping my brain around. That's really cool though that y'all cover such like a wide range of things. With just 4 of you guys, you said you cover a pretty.
Oh, I feel like we just are scratching the surface of all of the different ways that all of the different types of death work. We would love to have more different kinds of psychics and mediums or people. I don't know. There's across doing death work for the living, death work with dying, and working with the spirit world. There's so many different paths to death work, and so I'm glad you had the reaction, because we always feel so self-conscious of like, oh, we're a mighty alliance of 4. There's
No, I mean, it's niche. Like, obviously it's niche, but I feel like within that niche, it's y'all cover a lot. I mean, give yourself some credit. That's a lot. I was looking on your website earlier and I was just scrolling and I was like, this keeps going. Like, they offer so much.
Do people ever come to you and not really know what they need, but need something? Do you help kind of direct them, or do they seem pretty set on, I would like to go this path or another path?
That's a good question.
I would say that we also specialize in kind of ritual design. So we let things intuitively and organically see what comes from emergence and that unknown. So sometimes people do need specific things. Like, I focus a lot on psychopomp work, and that's really helping families and people who are in those places between life and death, a lot of end of life care, people in hospice, people who are just in and out of consciousness, whether they're older or younger, just like in the hospital, things like that. And so someone may specifically need that. Other people have came to us just feeling like they need to let part of themselves die, let things go, and then like kind of figure out how to have their rebirth cycle. And so with that, we can more tap into like intuition, using different forms of divination, using different tools to kind of explore with them what they're comfortable with and where they need to go with it. So it really, I mean, we try to find a shoe for every foot, and then sometimes things are out of our scope, which is where we have to like pull in other people and make sure we're referring, because we ultimately want to help the community. So whatever someone needs, if we can't do it, if we can't intuit what they need, then we want to partner them with someone who can.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, it's like 50-50. So half the time someone's like, I need a celebrant for a queer funeral, or I need a medium to make contact with, someone on the spirit side, or I need a psychopomp because my loved one or loved pet, even because you've done psychopumping for animals as well. My loved pet is in the process of dying, and I want to make sure they have everything they need to cross over. The other 50% of the time, I would say people come to us because they've had some sort of either traumatic experience or a chronic illness. A lot of times people are experiencing chronic physical ailments, and they start to suspect that those are spiritual in nature. And a lot of times, if you're holding grief and you're holding on to sort of stagnant energy in your body, that will bloom all kinds of physical issues. And so doing death work rituals helps ground that energy, release it, so that you can, like Clark said, move into a new cycle. Because that's really, from a magical perspective, what we mean when we're talking about death is sort of the primordial forces of decomposition, of releasing energy from one form so that it can be recycled, repurposed, released, etc., into new forms. It's the end, the necessary, natural, and inevitable end of one cycle so that a new cycle can begin.
Yeah, I really like what you say about how you can holding on to stuff affects your body, because I can hold a grudge like nobody's business, and I feel like,
oh my gosh, where have you been my whole life?
I feel like it explains a lot about
grudges.
why
we think about stuff that happened like 10 years ago, and we'll revisit, just somehow pop into our heads and feel like, why did I say that? So are you able to kind of tell us a little bit about that? Because I like the idea of even letting a cynical side, which I definitely have a huge cynical side since I was a little kid, about what that's like, or the critical part of your side of yourself dying, what that method is like, or the work that you do with that.
Yeah. Well, in a broader sense, and we can get more into your specific part of the question, like I've definitely recently done rituals with some local people and friends and community members around us who were just holding on to a lot of anger and like maybe exes in their lives or people in their lives and they were still very deeply like almost rage affected by these people, and like this lack of closure, or this lack of just not like a misunderstanding, or not understanding why that energy is there and why they're feeling that fire so hard in them. And then kind of designing rituals around that, of like really exploring like where that's held in your body, where that's held in relation to you, and then what's a method that you can feel like you're getting that cathartic release of it to move forward. And so we've done that externally for other people, and then both Anne and I on our own individual path has definitely done certain types of ego deaths. It's funny you said about the critical, cynical side. We both recently had to explore that in terms of like our self-perception of how we view art and artists and things like that, of like not being too cynical or not being too critical of it, to allow our creativity to also emerge as writers and creatives as well, and to, you know, kind of let part of ourselves die to allow space for and create space for these other parts to blossom. And just really, but sometimes it's hard work. You really have to really reflective, and really have to be vulnerable with yourself, or with someone has to be vulnerable with you and feel comfortable and create those spaces. And that's something we really pride ourselves on, is being able to create spaces where people feel safe to really explore that in a way where they're energetically stable, they're in a comfortable spot, you know, those kind of things as well.
Yeah. And then to get specific into it, of what examples of that look like. So the basics of ritual design are visualizing and creating physical symbols of the energy that you're working with, and actually like doing something with it. And so a lot of times, most of our ritual design is custom. Like, we don't follow a specific tradition of, oh, this is how we do this. We'll talk to people and kind of understand what their affinities are. So a lot of people have affinities towards a particular element, like, oh, I'm a water person, I'm a fire person, I'm an earth person, I'm an air person. So understanding what their affinities are helps us design rituals specific to that. I'm a water person. And so when I'm doing my own ego death, like I did an ego death ritual for myself last year to help sort of purge some imposter syndrome. And so it was about visualizing where that was in my body. And then I drew it out into this picture where I was actually sort of locating in this sort of image of my body where I was holding these beliefs that I needed to let go of, and sort of writing that out. And then ended up kind of taking that piece of paper and like releasing it into Lake Michigan. Or like, you can release things by burning it. You can release things by like cutting actual physical cords and threads. You can release things by burying them if you're an earth person, or by confining them to crystals if you're an earth person. You can sing things. You can sing things out of your energetic system if you're an air person, or if that's kind of what you're magically attuned to. So there's a lot of different paths to get to the same results. But the idea is, let's locate what that stagnant belief is that you need to give death to, and then physicalize that through ritual. Does that help answer your question?
For sure, yeah.
We went in a lot of directions with it. So,
and even went into the next question.
It answered questions. Yeah, I didn't know I had.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that even prompted just noticing that you're close to Lake Michigan, and you had just mentioned how that plays a part in some of the rituals that you do. Can water just play a big part in either healing or grief rituals, or just, I guess, in magical practices in general?
I mean, short answer, yes. So water is one of the classic elements. I mean, each of the elements actually have their relationship to healing work. Water is a really classic one because it is the element of emotion. It's the element of subconscious, which is where a lot of healing needs to take place. And so including water as a physical aspect in ritual can be really helpful for that. Also, water is, I mean, in and of itself is a magical substance. A lake like Lake Michigan, which is this gigantic, mythic body of water here in the US, that, well, in Canada, that like entire, well, I guess Michigan is just in the US, isn't it? Anyway, this isn't a geography lesson, but entire communities over centuries have organized around it. So there's just a ton of juice. There's a ton of power in Lake Michigan. And so sometimes when we're doing big magic, we go out there to, with respect and permission, harness that power for the purpose of our rituals. But also just magically speaking, anywhere where it's a liminal space where you've got earth, sea, and sky in one horizon, they just tend to be magical places, magically charged places. And so even if we're not doing death work, if we're doing any kind of ritual, a lot of times it's really nice that we have the luxury of just strolling 15 minutes to the lakefront and doing our work there.
Yeah, I don't think we have any close access to water here.
No, we have Lake Lanier, which is like cursed as fuck.
I'm
not going into that. I don't know. Have you? Have y'all heard about that? Not to go too far off base. Okay, it is a lake in Georgia here. And so basically to make it, I don't know how long ago, Avery might know how long ago it was, but they basically of course it was like a black town and they were like, hey, get out. We're going to flood this, including cemeteries, a whole town they flooded. And people die in it constantly.
Constantly. There's bodies in this lake that people go and go boating and swimming, and it's cursed. It's like, if you go there, you run the chance of something bad happening.
Yeah, and people are getting drunk and being stupid. I know that happens in every lake, but I feel like it really happens at a high rate at Lake Lanier. I mean, it's known for that. Mm-hmm. I would not go. So talking about bodies of water holding energies and no, thank you.
I mean, lakes are a premise in a lot of horror movies.
For a reason. They're scary.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So we don't really have a lot of I guess water that we could tap into, making us be more earthbound, I guess, with our mountains and trails and everything. So
you have rivers or anything?
Okay, so I live up in North Georgia now, which there is a beautiful, nice, cold, fresh rivers up here. But when you get closer to the city and suburbs of Atlanta, there's only the Chattahoochee, which again is filled with tires and alligators. So, I mean, also not a good option.
Well, just get a bucket of rainwater. I don't know.
No, but there is some beautiful rivers up where I'm at.
Some
so
waterfalls up north.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's, if you know where to go, but as far as a big just body of water, nothing comes straight to mind.
I don't think I knew that about Atlanta.
I did not, but now I want to read more about this cursed lake.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, it really is. People go though. I mean, they go crazy. Even people I know, I'll see online over holiday weekends and stuff. I'm like, y'all are crazy.
We had a worker that was like, oh, thinking about going to Lake Lanier this weekend. And we are like, all right, cool. Nice knowing you. Just to mess with them. We'll probably do a whole episode on it, because there's a lot of flooded cities and kind of destroyed towns that specifically targeted people of color. So it it's terrible. But that's one of them. And on a lighter note,
I thought of a curse like I couldn't help myself. Okay, I do circling back. I do have a question y'all sparked, is talking about how people can be more attuned to specific elements. How do you know? Because I'm just trying to think. You got me thinking okay, so do I feel more in tune with one? And the answer is I don't know. I'm bad at introspection, so that's something I have to work on, is introspection. So maybe that's related to why I don't know if I relate more to one element versus the other. I'm sure I do.
Well, I mean, you may, and you probably do. I think sometimes if someone really has an affinity for one, they know that. there are people who just like love the sun, they love bonfires, they love candles, like anything that's there, and they're literally like a moth to the flame. And there are people who just like love haunted lakes, or any kind of lake, but like they love just like being in the pool, just being by the water, being near water. Like they can't imagine living in a city not on a coast. They can't, anything like that. There's different versions of it. They're like, people who love, like, earth winds are like really obvious, because it's like often people who like love being around plants, or like being in forests, or like just like digging, or love crystal, things like that.
Gardening.
So there's different types like that. And like for air people, it's just, like when the wind, like there's a calming effect. I think one of the signs of like an elemental affinity would be like kind of the relationship to it that creates like a calming effect, or a sense of serenity with it. Like, you just know, like if you're in that space, it just like relaxes you and syncs you up and lets you just kind of like connect with that kind of primal force. And so, I mean, I don't know if you're not clear of what you love, how you really find that. I suppose you could just explore like what you feel most drawn to. Like I'm an air person, but like I'm not a beach person. Like you'll never catch me just being in the sun. I left Florida for many reasons, but one of which is I hate sunlight. I don't hate sunlight, but like I do not love being in the sun. I don't like being like that, so I know like fire's not really strong affinity for me, because I don't have that connection of just like embracing it. And now that every person who likes fire loves the sun, but like that's like an obvious choice. So, if you feel like and you can like a lot of things. Like I don't hate any element. I don't think anyone's like, oh, earth. Can you imagine a tree? Like no one's really saying that, but you may just feel like more of a pull towards something. And then, if you're looking at that for designing a death, like a ego death, or like some kind of death ritual, it just finds what you're most comfortable with. What has the most impact to you? And honestly, I use fire a lot, because fire is such a transformational element. The burning of something, and just like that is immediate transformation. It's an immediate release. Throwing something into the water, you're like, oh, it can rush back in the lake, or you're burying it, still not gone, but fire is like, it is gone. So I think there's different ways depending on like what tool speaks more to how you need that to physically manifest.
Super interesting. Now I'm going to be thinking about, this is what I'm going to be thinking about in the middle of the night tonight.
We're thinkers here.
What about you, Avery? Do you feel a connection to one more than the other?
I think definitely earth for me. I mean, I have a garden. I like being outside, not necessarily in the sun either. Like you said, I think it just doesn't like me, because I just overheat easily. But yeah, I don't mind being dirty. I could be like a goblin in the forest for the rest of my days if I had the choice.
Yeah, no, you do have like forest goblin energy. I really love that about you, truly. I have goblin energy. I don't know what kind yet, though. Working through it.
I told Jason that, my partner, and yeah, he was like, didn't want to go out in the forest. I didn't want to retire out in the forest. He doesn't like to be dirty or like get dirt on him. And I was like, well, that's unfortunate. That's my retirement plan. So
also, Avery and I both have partners named Jason. We do not share a Jason. And for all the listeners as well.
Yeah, no judgment if you do. We just
that's fine. Like life would be probably easier. But like there are two.
Where can they hang out?
What's that? Do they hang out?
No, they hang out. You're like, oh, we're hanging with J Squared tonight.
No, we do.
Okay.
Well, we have a coworker that would say like, how's your respective Jasons? How's your respective Jasons? It's a good way to kind of knock it all out.
Yeah. Jasons.
Yeah. And yeah, it wasn't planned. Like some people.
No, it was not planned. Yeah. How could you even plan that?
I would just tell people it was planned. It makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
Like we went on findjason.com and we got our Jason.
jasonsonly.com.
Yeah, exactly.
We gotta start making up lies.
I know. Oh, I do all the time. No, I really don't. I'm not a good liar. I couldn't even lie about making up lies.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was gonna ask, just how you said you were trying to open the community and like welcome everyone to the Alliance, or to open up to more members, and it being more queer welcoming, do you feel like there's not more of a focus, but a focus on folks having like wanting rituals with, or that have to do with their families, or, you know, maybe letting go of some of those judgments for, you know, being queer, not falling into some society norms or their family norms? Or is that a loaded question?
Short answer, yes. I guess, I mean, I can take that one, because so one of the things that I do as part of both my magical and more sort of like mundane day job, like my actual day job, is grief work. Mm-hmm. So I specifically focus on helping people move through the process of grief. And so, yeah, I've worked with many queer people, many trans people to complete those transitions in a graceful way. A lot of that is like joyful release, like taking off masks that don't serve you anymore. And a lot of it is very sad release of realizing that by embracing your true identity, there may be a cost to that. You may lose community, you may lose family, you may lose a sense of safety as a result of that. And then, yeah, all of the internalized homophobia and the self-hatred and the self-judgment you might have been growing up with, definitely giving death to that. Like, whoo, let's get rid of that. You don't need it anymore.
Mm-hmm. And you've become or gotten certified as a grief recovery method practitioner, which is definitely a mouthful for certification. How did you go about that, like getting that? And can you tell us a little bit about that method?
Yeah, sure. So I found the grief recovery method back in 2019 because one of my best friends died of cancer. And so I was looking for grief programs. I just Googled and found the grief recovery method. It's been around for about 40 years. And there's this place, quote unquote, it's not a physical place, but it's the Grief Recovery Institute exists. And so you can both find, sign up for the grief recovery method to go through it as a griever. And you can also learn more about their certification process. So I went through the grief recovery method program to help cope with and to move through my grief from losing my friend Susanna. And I just thought it was awesome. It just was so effective and transformational. And so I decided to go back to the Institute and become certified in it. I went through a couple rounds of certification, actually. So I am able to facilitate that program virtually online. I do it over Zoom, so I can work with anyone, anywhere. And it's an educational intervention, not a therapeutic intervention. Like, I always like to be really clear about that. Like, I'm not a therapist, but I work with many therapists, and I'm in therapy, and I love therapy, and I help people find therapists that they love. But the grief recovery method is this finite 6-week program, and it is really more about learning a set of tools that help you confront and process your experiences of loss directly, rather than compartmentalizing and repressing them forever.
Yeah, I can see how that would be very helpful. So we talk about grief, obviously, a lot on this podcast. I mean, we have whole episodes circling grief, and it's really amazing to see the resources that are available to people, because I feel like, especially generations above us you didn't want to show emotion, especially men, men couldn't show emotion. They had to be strong. That's still obviously in our society. But I mean, I couldn't imagine people died and they just were like, don't acknowledge it, and again, think about, especially something we talk about a lot, is how death and the perception of death has changed so much. I mean, so much.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree with you, and I also disagree with you. So I agree with you in that, like, the recent generations definitely had a very death phobic and have a death phobic and grief phobic posture that, like, folks in our generations and younger are sort of just now figuring out how to get out from under the shadow of. But if you go back farther, like, I mean, this is kind of the cost of white supremacy, right? Like, it's really ground out all of the cultural traditions of people that are co-opted into whiteness or eradicated by whiteness, because there were as many cultural traditions, belief systems, and rituals, both individual and community-based rituals for dying, for death, and for the mourning and celebration process that used to exist that have just all been wiped away in recent centuries. And so, I think now we're excited to see those traditions sort of being revived.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I'm glad you said that, because I really, when I was thinking like waspy, like, that kind of view of emotions, because you're right. I mean, obviously we've covered a lot of that on this podcast as well, as like the tradition and rich cultural like practices surrounding death and grief. But yeah, of course the like waspy whites came out and came up and they squashed it all.
And capitalism, right? The funeral industrial complex realized that they could profit from death. And like, I know you've interviewed death doulas on this podcast, and like they're doing some of the most exciting work to bring back home funeral traditions, to bring back green burial traditions. So that's so exciting to see. Oh man, if you're a death doula out there listening to this and you work, I mean, some death doulas are really more on the logistical side of the services they provide for like end of life planning. Some death doulas are more on the psycho-spiritual side. Some straddle both. But if you're one of those death doulas on the psycho-spiritual side and death work is part of your practice, like, get in touch with us. Join the alliance.
Yeah, you heard it here first. We actually have a pretty wide network of death doulas that we've worked with. So we'll definitely throw something up on social as well and try and see if we can make a connection, because I love a death doula. I love them. Man, we get off those episodes and me and Avery are texting and we're like, are you okay? Like, I don't know why it always ends up really heavy. But they're such beautiful, wonderful. I mean, all the death workers that we've spoken with are the most like unique kind of special soul. You have to be, I guess, when you're dealing with people in such a vulnerable area.
Yeah, and I have found the more death doulas I meet, just because I do grief work, we are two sides of the same coin, right? Mm-hmm. I would say the death doulas, those death workers are getting the dead where they need to be, and the bereavement side, the grief workers are getting the living where they need to, go to kind of complete all those cycles. But the more I meet and interact with, I just love the eclectic backgrounds of all the death workers we tend to meet. Like, everybody brings this weird hodgepodge of interests and experiences and education. Like, you have like a master's in systems thinking, and I just recently completed a graduate certificate in applied mythology. We both have had like weird storied careers, and so like every death worker I meet always has some weird story of like, I kind of ended up in this because when I overlapped all of the circles of my weird niche interests, death work was just naturally what was at the center of that Venn diagram.
That's a really good point. I'm thinking now about the folks that we've worked with and spoken to. And yeah, it's weird. You're right. It's a weird Venn diagram. Like, death works at the center. But
I think because like death and grief and change are one of the most omnipresent parts of our life, but they're the most sort of taboo as well. So it touches all of us, but usually you end up here by a weird path.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, just how death can have an effect on us and just the reaction to death. I mean, kind of weirdly transitioning to like a lighter side, where you have some videos that kind of focus on some of the fun opinions of, you know, magical characters or you know, in fantasy or sci-fi. Did you want to do that to kind of break from the heaviness of talking about grief or death, or just you know, you enjoyed these magical creatures and, you know, the entertainment that you loved? How did that kind of series, which has been short so far, kind of come about?
Well, I think we were just trying to, you know, we're death workers and we do a lot of things around death. And so kind of to your point, we're like, you know, we try to have videos that have like just tarot readings and like that, but also we went forth a media area of just kind of like fun things and books and TV shows, because I think with a lot of magical practitioners anyway, a lot of us like looked at those things when we were younger and they were fun, and we're like one of my recent videos I talked about Willow is like my favorite witch. And, you know, it's like she was this nerdy girl who like came to magic, was part of the Scoobies with Buffy, and she had a little gang. And like part of the, like, as a nerdy kid in high school, like who didn't want to like access, like figure out how to access those paths to magic. And, you know, her arc got kind of weird. But, you know, but also that show, she also dealt with a version of death too. And like multiple things, you know, spoiler alert, some major people die in Buffy. We haven't watched it 20 years ago.
Yeah, there's some depictions of necromancy in Buffy.
Yeah. So, but we kind of started just adding those in just to kind of show that, you know, we're also just like regular people who don't walk around in like a gothlet apartment, you know, with, you know, what is that show, What We Do in Shadows?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you know, like we're not the Addams family over here being like, oh, who died today for us. But like we also, you know, we love magic, we love fantasy as well, you know, and we like to find a balance between the fantastical and our, like, you know, our living magic practices too. So it's kind of fun just to see. I mean, I can't name a single witch or magic practitioner who didn't have like media icon, whether in a book they read or in a movie or TV show, that was like their little witch awakening. You know, even it was like 1986, The Worst Witch with Tim Curry and Feruzia Balk in it. You know, like you want to go way back. Like everyone kind of had a little something, you know.
Tim Curry, multiple awakenings for me with Tim Curry, multiple.
It just kept hitting.
Yeah, well, it was kind of my roundabout way of just pointing out how Willow dealt with a serious death, loss in her life. And I think a lot of people watching it totally understood why she did what she did. But yeah, I think it's like, it was really important to see how characters deal with death, especially if you have that kind of ability or power in your life. Like it can just take you over and just have, you know, such a grip on your emotions where you don't even see anything else. Like it just your eyes are blacked out and it's just consumes you, which it did, like her character.
Right. Well, Willow's such an interesting character because she deals with major death twice, you know, and so like season 6, spoiler alert again.
We
also
talk about it.
We're 20 years late.
Yeah, if you haven't watched Buffy yet, hit pause on this podcast right now. Go watch 7 seasons and come back.
But like she deals with a different type of way of dealing. It's also still a one-track mind of dealing at the beginning of the season with dealing with death and dealing with a major death, and then at the end of the season how it kind of took her down this whole journey, because there's a whole arc around how she dealt with the beginning of the season's death to how she dealt with the end of the season's death. And it's just really interesting, like how they showed the places kind of people go with that and the way they responded. But even in the beginning of the season, she was willing to do anything and have her, you know, if you watch the episode again, I don't know why you think spoilers, it's so old, but you know, she like had a snake coming out of her mouth and her body was cut up and stuff, like anything to kind of like get over this group couldn't handle, you know, what was going on. And I thought she was really interesting in how they portrayed that, and then how it ended with that, like you said, more of the end of the season when it was just like Darth Rosenberg.
Yeah. I mean, and they also dealt with, you know, someone numbing after a death, someone, you know, trying to go to like escapism. And so, I mean, when I saw the video of you saying Willow, I was like, yes. Because I mean, I was like, what other witchy character? I mean, she's just it for me. So
also, side plug for Buffy as well. I know I keep talking about Buffy, but season 5, the episode The Body, with Joyce, I feel like that was one of my first exposure to death on a television media focus, that you could feel what those characters were going through.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I was just like 16 and very impressionable, but like that episode was like so solemn and so severe and shocking. It was just like, it was good. Even thinking about it, I'm like, I know, I'm like, I gotta rewatch that.
I still ugly cry when I watched that episode. Yeah.
Okay. I've never seen Buffy.
What?
Okay, I'll tell you why.
First off, so pause the podcast and go watch 7 seasons.
Yeah,
I'll be back. Okay, one of the reasons, because like I missed a lot of I missed a lot of shows growing up just for whatever reason, and I've gone back and watched them as an adult, and I specifically have avoided Buffy because I saw like on Tumblr. Okay, again, spoiler alert if you haven't watched Buffy, and I don't know the characters, but I saw like a screen grab of one character like walking in on her mom, I guess, who was dead on a couch, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, I'm not watching this show. Like, I don't want to see that scene.
That is the episode I was referring to, season 5, The Body.
Yeah. I hope I wasn't too like aggressively spoilery, but like whatever. Anyway, that's like the one. Again, 20 years later, that's straight up. I saw that screen grab on Tumblr in like the heyday of Tumblr or whatever, you know, like 10 years ago. And that's why I won't watch Buffy, because I'm like, I don't want to watch that scene, that specific scene, because I reacted viscerally to just like that screen grab.
It was really a powerful moment though in that show. I mean, we don't need to harp on this for like the rest of this conversation, but we could. But it was like
they can fast forward through it if they don't.
It was a real moment. I mean, in teenage history of what was on the WB still. Yeah. So like there's Tuesday night, you were like, what happened? You know?
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, the shock of it, like you said, and I think they did a good job of filming what it would be like to be in a numb dream state. Like, this isn't real. I was just blown away because I was like, wow, that's exactly how it would feel. And like to have that on TV, I was just like, wow, how did they, capture that shock and just, just the lighting and all, just everything that went into the episode was super impressive to me in that sense. But yeah,
truly one of Anya's best performances. Like Anya, like the 3,000-year-old demon who became a human. Again, spoilers, here we go. But like how she handled that, because she is not familiar with like human processing and emotion, and how they just showed the powerlessness.
Yeah, and even with death, because she was an immortal being for 3,000 years. And so I think she represents, because there are no outright children on the show, but Anya's perspective in that moment, I think, represented almost like a child's mind trying to work through the concept of what death means. Because you remember her saying, she was saying like, I realized Joyce is never going to brush her teeth again. She's never going to eat cereal again. She's never going to do anything again. And you see the gears turning as she's trying to wrap her head around what it means to die. And yeah, so good.
I need to watch it. I'm avoidant. So as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's going to make me sad.
At least I can tell you a couple episodes if you don't want to get destroyed and I need to your life.
Yeah, y'all have sold Buffy for me though, so I need to just sit. I know I'll like it. That's the thing, is I know I'll like it.
It is not a perfect show. It is riddled with issues, but
well, it's of the times, right? I mean, especially anything from then, you rewatch it, you're like, oh no, like they're full of issues.
yeah, parts of Buffy do not age well, but it's still iconic.
Well, this is a Buffy podcast now.
I know. It's basically turned into. I thought that might happen, but I mean, I'm
not mad about it.
I'm here for it. So.
Okay, well, I guess this is like not a good segue, but I had this thought earlier and I'm interested. So y'all deal a lot with magic. How do you deal with, I guess not deal with, but do people ever get super skeptical to you? And how do you not hold firm in your beliefs, but how do you, I'm so bad. Like, okay, I'm going to read. But when it comes to like your magic, how do you deal with people who are skeptical of it, or who straight up just like don't believe in it, or maybe aren't respectful of it? So, because even if you don't believe in it, you can be respectful of it. But I'm sure some people just aren't, So, I mean, how do you face that or deal with it? Or do you just not? I mean,
I think for me, I don't really deal with those people. If someone is not respectful of it, I have nothing to prove someone else. A lot of the work we do for the community, it's free of charge. Like, we're here to help you. And so if someone is skeptical or want us to do a stage trick and pull a rabbit out of a hat, like, you came to the wrong place. I'm not here for spectacle, and we're not here for spectacle, I feel like. So, there is some people are skeptics, they are cynics, they don't respect it or believe it, but those are kind of people that we don't need to continue this conversation then. And I was raised evangelical, and I know how to argue with people about going to hell till the cows come home. But like, I don't need to take that energy into our spiritual practice now. If someone doesn't want to believe in something, or chooses to believe that what we're doing is wrong or is fake, or I just, maybe I just ask, like, to what end do you think we're doing this? Like, what benefit do I get from making you believe, like, helping you with this, or connecting with that energy, or giving you this reading? Like, where do you think this is going? And then, often they just want to so argue, and you're just like, I'm okay, I'm good.
Yeah, I just don't engage in those debates, because I just sort of like, all right, I have my belief system, you have your belief system. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, and I'm not interested in you telling me that I'm wrong. But I don't really run into it a ton. I feel like attracts like. We don't attract a lot of cynical people that don't end up on our doorstep. But if more often than not, if I bring up in conversation that I do magic, that I do spiritual work, it opens a doorway to a conversation with someone. Like, most people are curious about it. And even if they have a level of doubt or skepticism, you can see the curiosity override it in the moment, and they just keep wanting to ask questions. And then they start sort of admitting to whatever supernatural or magical experiences, or prophetic dreams, or, grandmothers who had a healing practice, or the way that they feel like they actually can telepathically communicate with their plants or their hamster or what have you. Like, more often than not, even if they start out from a skeptical posture, once we get to talking, there's interest there are experiences there that they have been searching for a way to explain and explore. So I don't know.
Yeah, the only area I really had a lot of pushback in is when it comes to mediumship, or even some psychopomp work, where like you're kind of connecting to people who are in and out of consciousness. Sometimes there's skepticism there, but the strongest part is with mediums, because there's been too many like cold readers, like, what's the guy crossing over with John Edwards or whatever. Like, and I don't know if they prove it. I don't want to prove or disprove any of those psychics or mediums. Teresa Caputo or whatever, Long Island medium. Is that her name? I don't know.
Yeah, that's her name. And you know what? I think she gives a bad name to all that.
Right. But like, good, bad, or indifferent, she's doing what she's doing. There's, there's a new show on Netflix about the Hollywood medium, Tyler something. I don't remember. They're all like that. But like, that's where a lot of this, like, I even have friends who are just, like, I recently had a friend who had someone very significant die, and they were just like, if you can recommend a medium, I would trust it, but there's too many people I don't believe, and too many charlatans, and too many. And so that's kind of the one area where people kind of like dig their heels in. And I always just, like, I can recommend somebody, your experience be your experience. I don't have that gift. I'm not telling you that there's a voice speaking to me from the other side right now. Like, but you have to kind of like put it on them to own that. And so, but I don't defend or negate if someone says they are, or if, a television person or personality is or is not legit. Like, I have no way of proving it empirically. So like, what am I going to do? Yeah.
Yeah. I also, not with death work, but on the healing side, I run into people who get really uppity and cynical about people who do, I don't think even those people would describe it as magic, but like alternative healing methods or more Eastern healing methods like Reiki. Like I know some people that are like, oh, Reiki is such a pile of bullshit and whatever. But to those people, I always want to just be like, have you met a rich healer? Have you, like, we're not living in a mansion. I'll show you my ATM receipts if you want to see that. Like, if I'm a charlatan and a snake oil salesman, I'm a bad one, because
Right.
we're not making money hand over fist doing magic.
Yeah, y'all are better than me, because I'd get pissed. I'd be like, no, you're not allowed to doubt me. Like, I don't know. I just don't like.
The person who admitted she holds grudges for a very long time would be aggressive or argumentative. It's shocking. Are you kind of shocking at it? Like,
I'm like telling on myself here. The best part is I'm not argumentative. I'll just hold it inside.
oh, okay. Even better. Great.
We'll make a note, and then see you years later.
Easily through it.
And I guess you have to be, when you have to be okay with that. When you're a magic worker, you work with that. You have to be okay with people not believing you, and it doesn't affect you. It would affect me.
Well, I think sometimes we're queer people too, so like adversity is in our blood. So
right. Forged in it.
People often, my entire life, have been against most things. So it's like, add it to the list. You don't believe in me? I don't care. I also like boys, so we're moving on.
I make that joke all the time. Like, it's just like, well, I'm, queer, non-binary, polyamorous, pagan, or like really spin the wheel and you will land on something that offends someone. So like,
yeah, see, you guys are just proving right, because I can't handle when people get weird about queer. I'm just like, about like y'all are better than me. I'm telling you, I need to learn to let go of some issues, because I will let things, Avery knows, because Avery has to listen to me bitching about stuff bothering me.
Basically, yeah, this podcast is like, our guests are way better than us.
They're just better than us.
They're just way better humans than we'll ever be. So we need to sign up for your get rid of our cynical and critical and holding grudges side. Sign up for some rituals there. So
I'm working on it,
Yeah.
it's not, we don't always turn the other cheek. Like, I definitely do correct people if they're being homophobic. I stand my ground, or even on the magic side, like I correct people if they are saying something like, oh, what is that voodoo? I'm like, let's not appropriate that term and use it irresponsibly. Voodoo is a living tradition that people practice, people of color primarily. So like, you don't get to just kind of like use that as this negative connotation vocabulary word. Let's scrub that out.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a good point. You guys must not read the comments on stuff, because that's another place I go bad. I read the comments on like random posts, and I just let it bother me.
Never read the comments.
Never read the comments.
Yeah. See, y'all, this is what I do. I'll read the comments, and then I'll just and I don't reply back. Like, I'm not like arguing with people on the internet. I'll like argue in my head, which is worse, I think, and less healthy. Anyway.
Well, if someone is wanting to either join your alliance, want to give, add to, the alliance with some of their skills, or just seek out, some of those, the rituals, or your help with, working on grief or letting a part of themselves go, how can they go about doing that?
Oh, well, I mean, they're welcome to go to our website, mortalpathalliance.org. And we do have like a contact us form there, but we're also on Instagram and TikTok. So all Mortal Path Alliance. So we track our messages, our DMs, anything like that. And honestly, we're here to help. It's community. Like I said, we are not, and also it's like we don't live in a mansion. We're not here trying to rake in the dollars. So we are always, anyone who needs what part of our services for those death, dying, and grieving kind of areas, we want to be helpful for. We're always looking for peers. We're really careful to not put this in a monetization form where we want mediums and we want, healers and other practitioners to be part of the alliance. But we also want to make sure that, we're all aligned with like, this isn't a platform for pay in terms of like, you join us and we're going to, have a reciprocity in terms of like a financial reciprocity and like how we're doing this. This is more about community engagement and creating a community.
Yeah, and answering a calling.
Yeah, answering a calling. It's less about how do we get more clients in that sense. So, anyone who is interested in reaching out, who wants to be part of that, they're allowed to have their own personal practice and stuff like that. But
and they definitely do. Like I would say, like Jamie, Roz, they have their own clients, they have their own practice, they have their own businesses as offshoots of this. It's just, I feel like that mortalpathalliance.org is a space where people can find you, right, and get what they need. And whether that's from the branch of free services that we provide to the community, like I said, because we're feel obligated to answer that calling, or whether it's something more specific to the person, or specialty services that we do charge for. We're really upfront about the delineation of those two on our website. So
yeah, I was gonna say yeah, I was just looking at your website. Everything, there's lots of free service, or lots of free resources for folks. And then I thought the stuff that was had a cost attached to it seemed very reasonable to me. I mean, nothing seemed like unobtainable for, I think, what the worth is. So
yeah, we try to make it accessible.
Yeah, it felt very accessible, which I think is really important.
Because I would never want that to be a barrier for someone to get what they need.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great and awesome resource for more people to, feel welcomed and access, and have you all as an amazing resource. So thank you so much for talking to us.
Yeah,
and I want to open it to any other questions. It's not the end of the.
Yeah, before we wrapped up, I wanted to ask, should we plug Queer Pagan Folks too? Yeah, because just another community that we kind of help maintain, that started out based in Chicago, but now I think it's just a virtual community, but it's Queer Pagan Folks, which is essentially just like our Instagram and TikTok. And that is it's specifically, queer pagans.
And it's folks with an X.
Folks with an X, yeah, thank you. Yes. And it's more focused, it's rather than being focused on death work, that community is focused on social justice magic.
Oh, cool.
A lot of our posts and videos do overlap because we do both, but sometimes they differentiate depending on the need. But we also, outside of death work, we are strong advocates for social justice magic and using energy. If we feel like if you can use things internally magically to affect yourself, you feel that we'll work that externally for greater change in communities and larger spaces.
Y'all are awesome. I don't know how you find the time. It's awesome.
We were talking about that before y'all got on. We were like, how do they find the time?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Doing wonderful things for y'all's communities. So it's very appreciated and noticed.
Thank you.
Was there anything else that you wanted to cover, talk about? I mean, I don't want to just,
cut you off
or just stick to maybe questions that we have. I feel like there's so much that we could talk about, but I want to leave that open to.
I think the only other thing we were kind of talking about in prep for this was a question that we get is, how do I know if I'm a death worker? Right? How do I know if that's my calling? And so we were kind of working through, okay, how would you know that? And we kind of kind of came up with 3 buckets. So one, I think the first and most common is if you have had some sort of initiatory experience, I'll call it. So an initiatory experience can range from kind of an overt magical experience of like, I dream of the dead, I speak to the dead, I've interacted with it in some way where I just have felt that spark. When I'm near death and grief, I feel something awaken in me. So that can be an initiatory experience, or oftentimes an initiatory experience can be a near-death experience that opens some door within you or leaves you kind of with one foot on the other side. And that in that case, you may be destined to be a death worker after that. So that's kind of the first one. The second one is if you find that you enjoy, get excited about, look forward to talking about death and dying and grief and trauma, you might be a death worker. You might have that calling, because guess what? Most people do not. Most people will not touch those subjects with a 10-foot pole. And so if you're drawn to it and you love talking about it, that maybe is an indication. So to the listeners out there for this podcast in particular, maybe something to think about. And then the third thing is just, if you're already doing magic, and pay attention to what fills your energy versus what depletes it. Because if you're doing spells related to death work and you find death work, grief work, trauma work, etc., and you find that afterwards you feel juiced up rather than depleted, then that's also a good sign that that is something you may have a natural affinity for and you might want to explore.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's actually that's very good. We're going to have to quote that also. We'll have to make an infographic or something with that, because that was really cool. Really cool.
I'm sure a lot of people have or had wondered what goes into a calling to work into death industry or death work. So those are very important things to look for. And I think with probably anything you do as well, if it's filling up your energy or depleting your energy, then those are probably, a good indication of something you're passionate about. But yeah, I think a lot of people are probably wondering how do I have it? Do I not? I love all those kind of memes and funny death work posts where it's like nobody, or like me trying to make friends, and then it's like, let me tell you about death work. Let me tell you about the death industry. So or talks about death. So I think those are funny. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing everything and connecting with us and taking the time to hang out with us and talk to us about what you do.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I really enjoy your show. You have really awesome guests, so we're so flattered that you responded, and we're like, yeah, come on.
we were very flattered. We're like, ooh, we don't have to chase someone down, they want us. We don't have to sell ourselves.
People. I'm just kidding.